I'll call to order the meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for March 12, 2026 at 4 p.m. Will the city recorder please call the roll? Here.
Council President Barry? Here. Councilor Shevlin?
Here.
Councilor Cunningham?
Here.
Councilor Skull?
Here.
Okay, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag,
of the United
United States.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council President Barry, can I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
I move to approve the following order of the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been approved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. So I know we're jumping right into citizens' input, and we don't have concerns. I just want to let you know that staff and me and maybe other members of council might have had communications regarding the closure of the Siemens Child Development Center. It's a big, hot topic. We're getting a lot of emails and responding. I didn't want us not to say something in a public meeting in case community members at home are listening that we're not on it and concerned. It has been in existence for over 30 years, and so I'm just flagging that. So with that, there's no mayor business or communication, citizens input, announcements. Do we have anybody signed up at all, online or in person? Are we good to go? No? Okay, so I'm going to skip that process. We're jumping right to new business. And staff, please provide a report on the city manager employment agreement.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time this afternoon. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules for a special council meeting. I have Richard Myers, who is the consultant for the city manager recruitment, here today, who will discuss the employment agreement, that the two options that you see before you, and he will go through the salient points and then also help answer any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to do this and talk about the work that's been involved. Over the last several weeks, the Mayor and Councilor Skull have been heavily involved in the process. They've put a significant amount of time into looking at options and reviewing proposal from or offers from Gina. And back and forth. They've significant review by legal counsel, Tamara Russell with CIS as well, has gone through the process. What we have before you this afternoon, is two copies of draft employment agreements for the city manager. And the reason we have two is not because of any flaw or one's wrong and one's right. It's because there's some differences of opinion. And we have those two prepared for you since under state law, you have the unique situation that two council members that are all that can meet and discuss outside of a quorum. So if in order to resolve the difference of opinion, we need to come to the council as a whole, because if we brought one more council into this, it would be a quorum and would be a violation of state law if we didn't do it in a public meeting with the full quorum. So we have these two drafts. Option 1 and option 2, they are essentially identical except for one little subsection. So what I'll do is I'll just step through the agreement that's labeled option 1 and kind of just step through it until we get to that point where there's some differences in everything there. So basically the proposal or the request from Gina was to have a agreement that would be a year and a half, from April 1st to September 30th, because of elections and trying to make sure that new counselors, if any new counselors come on, we don't have them working on a renewal of an employment agreement right away. And so she proposed the April to September length for the first term, that has worked into the draft here. That's section 101 in terms. The term is that, hey, and anytime during that term, the employee can resign and leave. The city council can terminate the position as well. It creates no right of being employed. It's a at-will position that can be terminated at any point and ended by either party. There are some restrictions later on in the agreement regarding those, and we'll get to those as we move through. Section 1.02 talks about the duties and authorities, and if there are any questions, I can't see you or you're very small, and if I do see you, let me know and we can stop and talk about any point that we need to talk about. The duties and authority, these line out the basic duties and responsibilities of a city manager and the relationship with the city, what the city manager kind of does and how that all ties in with the form of government you have as a council manager form of government. That they have the ability to make hiring and firing and decisions regarding personnel, except for the ones that are in your charter that you as a council have authority to do. That the city manager will faithfully and with reasonable care perform their duties with expertise and compliance with all the laws of the city, the state, and federal government, following city policies and doing and keeping up with those and as they're amended. And then also in C, that the employee shall have the ultimate supervisory responsibility over all staff, except for, again, those that are hired directly by the council. But the city can delegate some of that responsibility and some pieces of that to them to take care of as well. But it has to be done by the council. The charter and the code spells out that they have the establishment to set up some internal regulations as a city manager to make sure the city is operating efficiently, and that the city shall be allowed to attend and can attend the meetings of the governing body, except where the executive rules state that they can't attend it for an executive session or something like that. And then in F, that the city agrees to promptly communicate with the employee reasonable opportunity to cure any criticisms or complaints. That we're basically asking there that, hey, this is your employee, and some of the best philosophy in the employment world is address issues. If there's an issue that pops up, let's address it right away. And that's basically what that's doing. And they will carry out the city's lawful policy directives, goals, and objectives as they're communicated to the employee, and present the information there in G, and address those immediate needs. So it basically lines out all those characteristics and the operating and some of the employment relationship between the council and the manager. Ethical commitments in section 1.03. This lines out the responsibility of the city manager to stand up to the highest professional standards possible. And that includes following Oregon state ethics rules and laws, as well as following the ICMA Code of Ethics. However, Oregon law is the one that's going to take precedent. If there's a conflict between those, and some specific things in Oregon law may have some issues there with the meals and some of those things that aren't necessarily included in the ICMA ethics, but it covers that the employee will be responsible for keeping those. That also, the employee can't endorse any candidates, can't sign or circulate petitions, participate in fundraising exercises or activities, put up signs for council members, or misuse their public time by doing things for campaigns or something like that. It also says that the employer, you as the city council, cannot urge, encourage, ask the city manager to participate in any of those specific campaigns or fundraising requests or anything like that, or endorse candidates that way, to keep them neutral. The city manager is a non-political, in a political environment, but non-political professional that is been hired to do those administrative functions without being political. And that's the key, trying to keep that strong there. Article 2, we get into 2.1. This is where we get into some of the specific points as we visited with Gina and passed her request for compensation and looked at what the compensation package was. She's requested $216,000 as her base compensation, and she has requested no tech allowance or no car allowance, that those are essentially rolled into this salary then and included there. And that at any time, the city council can review that salary and do that in section B there. It talks about that as long as it's a lawful action of the council as a whole and make cooperation and everything there. Health, disability, and life insurance, your health benefits are in section 2.02. Basically, this is saying that the employee gets all the same benefits as normal city employees based on your adopted policies for health and benefits. And they're allowed those minimum things, the same things as other employees. Vacation and sick leave in 2.03. This lines out how to use vacation and sick leave. One of the things that you'll find, and you've already seen it with Gina, and you've probably seen it with Brian as well, it is tough for city managers to use their vacation time they accrue, especially since you've got an employee who's already at the max of accrual for vacation under the existing policies. And so one change in the vacation and sick leave that she's requested is that the employee be able to cash out 80 hours instead of 40 hours, which most employees do, because she may not be able to use the vacation time that is allotted to her just because of the role of the city manager. The retirement, 2.04. This one lays out that she's a member of the state employment system, PERS, and you'll continue to do that under the same policies as you do with the other city employees. And in addition to the state retirement program, you have and do contribute to employees. And this percentage is a 7.7% for the employee's base salary into that 401A plan, a deferred comp type plan that the employee is invested in it. So, and that would be the level of her compensation there. And that they can then participate in any other 457 plan that the city may have as well, but it's on their own. 2.05, these are general business expenses. And so what's included here is professional dues in A for the city manager to be a member of OCCMA, ICCMA, Oregon City County Management Association, International City Management Association, or any others that are good and tied to the function of her position. B is that you will budget for, as well as participation in A, that they are able to participate in those conferences and continued professional growth programs and everything that are there. B is that you'll budget and pay reasonable travel and subsistence expenses for the employee to be able to attend those professional and official travel meetings associated with those different organizations, ICMA and OCCMA. ICMA has an annual conference around the country. OCCMA has their spring and summer conference, and they participate and also have a fall conference that's in conjunction with League of Oregon Cities. And so those would be things to be able to participate in. Some cities include National League of Cities in there. Some cities, the manager doesn't go to National League and leaves that for the elected officials. I'm not sure how that is here, but this doesn't talk about National League of Cities. The city agrees to budget and pay for those expenses for short courses and institutes. and seminars that are necessary for professional development as well. These are additional training opportunities that might pop up. Some of them will be league. Some of them may be from ICMA or OCCMA as well. D, the city agrees to offer the employee access to executive coaching associated with during this first term of the contract to help with any needs that there may be in learning specifics or things as moving into that executive level position as a manager. E, the city won't require that she use any vacation time to go to any of the workshops or conferences. Those will be on paid work time. The city acknowledges in EF the value of being a part of community groups and organizations, and will pay reasonable dues and fees associated with some of those local civics and clubs and organizations. And G, recognizing the importance of having a way to communicate quickly to you and you to her, that G provides the opportunity for a laptop, a phone, tablet, those devices, those tech devices that would be needed for performing her function and job as a city manager. Article 3, these are the general work conditions, and really what they are is tying into the performance evaluation in 3.01, that the city will do a performance evaluation sometime annually, approximately annually, but sometime during that first year and a half of the contract, that it will be subject to a process and form and criteria and format that under state law in Oregon, in order to be doing it in executive session, you have to do that in a public session and in a public way so that people get to see what criteria and objective things you're evaluating your city manager on. Also in B, that you agree that you may agree to mutually have a third-party facilitator help develop some of that, work through creating the forms and the criteria, asking, assessing with the council, what kind of things do you want to ask? How do we want to evaluate communication skills? What are you looking for there, and helping put together a package so that you have a good form to do the evaluation and a process to do that. Unless the city employee or the manager requests it in writing, the process shall be conducted always in executive session pursuant to state law, and that it won't prohibit the city from sharing any of that information with the respective legal counsel as well. And then in D, that if you modify the agreement, the forms or the criteria at any time, that there's a period of time that you're going to provide the employee to be able to adapt to and address those new criteria. You don't want to go in and say, yeah, a week before the evaluation, oh, we're going to look at this too, and go back over the last year to evaluate on that without giving a heads up that that's what's going on. And then nothing in this prohibits the council from participating in more less formal opportunities to evaluate employees' performance, to give input, and to talk about corrective actions and things like that that might need to be made. In other words, we're both working towards success in this relationship, and that's what that's kind of trying to tell us. 3.02 is hours of work. It is recognized that the employee must devote a great deal of time outside the normal office hours on business for the city. And on that realm, the city is going to give reasonable time off so that they can take and accommodate and adjust for that, and with their own personal lives and everything, as long as it doesn't interfere with the functions of the city manager. So that's just a provision to help make sure that there's opportunities to be able to adjust those as they need to see. 3.03 is basically saying that, hey, this employee is yours. She's not going to work for anybody else unless you say so, say she can. And there may be opportunities, and what's spelled out in here are the only opportunities that are spelled out is if there are some teaching or indirect benefit that or other consulting or teaching opportunities that she could be participating in. For example, Portland State sometimes does have acting city managers help them in their public management program. And those would be opportunities that would, number one, be beneficial for the city as well as the employee, but also be beneficial for the future of local government in the community and around the state and everything. So those are the things that are there and addressed. But this is something to make sure that the employee must give you notice before they undertake any kind of activity outside. They are going to be the city manager unless they let you know that they're going to do something else. Article 4, I'm going to pause and just make sure there's no questions so far. Okay, going through this quickly. Article 4 deals with separation. This is the part of the agreement that talks about how do we deal with the separating part, the terminations, the resignations, all those things that may happen during the employment relationship. The employee may terminate this agreement by providing at least 60 days of notice, unless you agree otherwise. I mean, if perchance in 15 years, Gina decides she's retiring and she gives you a little notice and says, hey, I'm going to be retired. I want to retire in 2 months or 3 months. You can then work together and say, can you stretch it out to 4 months? That may sound familiar to somebody in the room, but those kind of things can happen, as well as maybe something opens up and we need to shorten the days of notice. Those are all things that can happen as well. But really, the notice is 60 days, and unless otherwise worked out. Termination. This section 4.02 defines what termination is. Those acts that would make the act of terminating the agreement. And this is specifically for the purpose of termination, what the council or what is happening to the employee to deem what termination is. And how that'll apply, because that then applies to the severance and other things that would happen. For the purpose of the agreement, the number 1A is if a majority of the council votes to terminate the employee in a public meeting, that is termination. That's completely understood. B, if the city or citizen or legislative acts to amend the provisions of the city charter or code pertaining to the role, powers, duties, or authority or responsibilities of the manager, or the type of government or any of those things, the employee has the right to declare that such amendments may constitute a termination. Say, for example, somebody puts in a charter amendment that removes the hiring and firing authority of the city manager, that they no longer can hire and fire employees, that's all up to the city council. I don't think you want that responsibility, but somebody has done it and put it in the charter. The manager has that right to then say, hey, this has severely reduced the authority that I have and ability I have to do those things as a city manager, and I'm counting it as a termination. There have been cities that have actually had a charter amendment passed that said that no employee can earn a certain amount of money above a certain amount. And if that amount is below what the city manager makes, that's considered a termination. So those are the kind of things that covers if there's a legislative act out in the public. If the city reduces the base salary of compensation of the city manager in an amount greater than the percentage of other department heads, then the employee can, and they can't reach an agreement with the employee regarding that. The employee could agree to it, but then such action could be deemed a termination as well. Item D, if the employee resigns following an offer to accept a resignation, whether formal or informal, by city representatives of the majority of the city council, then that can be determined as a termination as well. And so if a couple of them go and say, hey, if you resign by this date or resign, then we'll accept it, or something along those lines, that can be determined to be a termination as well. And then the final one is a breach of contract. If it's declared by either party that there's been a breach, it has to be cured and go through that process. But that notice of the breach and the final breach could be determined to be a termination, depending on how that works out and what the result of that is. The employee's refusal to comply with a directive that violates the code of ethics shall not be a cause for termination. So if, say, for example, the employee says, somebody asks the employee to endorse them as a candidate or endorse a couple of counselors or somebody as candidates, and they say, no, I'm not going to do that. You can't terminate for that. Well, if you do, it's termination, and you can't do it for as a cause. Those aren't things that could be cause. Accrued leave. Upon the leave, the severance of the employee, if the employee is not going to be employed anymore, regardless, they get paid their accrued vacation leave time. That's normal. I think that's even state law, but it's here that regardless of whether they receive a severance package or not, if they leave employment, they get their accrued leave. They're not eligible for a payment for unused sick leave, though, and that's spelled out clearly here. Those are basically city policies. Section 4.04 is our severance section. This is if the employee is terminated as defined in 4.02. If the employee is terminated, and unless it's an exception in section 4.04b, then the severance policy payment applies. And that would be 6 months or the greater of 6 months or 1 month for every year of service as the city manager. So essentially for the first 6 years under this agreement, the severance would be 6 months. On the 7th year, it would be 7 months of severance, and that's how that works out. So it's recognizing that the length of service for the employee there. The minimum, and subsection B under this, for a minimum of 6 months following the termination, as in section 4.02, the city shall provide outplacement services should the employee desire to have them not in an amount not to exceed $10,000. So during that 6 months, that would apply. And then B, this is the exception to the severance responsibilities. If the city council, through a thorough investigation, has reasonable cause to believe the city manager has engaged in criminal conduct, has other off-duty behavior that significantly impairs the employee's ability to provide their job, to do their job and job responsibilities. They committed fraud and misappropriated city funds, goods, or services for the manager's own benefit. They violated Oregon ethics law. They refused to comply with the written policies of the city, or other acts that cause injury to the city, including but not limited to willful, corrupt, reckless misuse of official authority. And then the city may terminate them with no obligation to pay severance. And then if there is a termination and there's severance, the employee, it must be in accordance with a separation agreement that's agreed between the city and the employee. In this section, and the remaining portion is section 5.01 and 2 and 3 and 4. These are more of your bonding, your indemnification clauses. The effective date, it becomes effective April 1st. Precedent setting, dispute resolution. Dispute resolution would be through negotiation, and a mediator will not include. I thought that we excluded arbitration. I believe, yeah, that's not in there. And so all of those things would be under the after 5.0, and thus, and we can talk about those if you want, but those are your basic language. Those have been gone over by CIS as well, and comply with the policies that you have and with CIS and their requirements or insurance and stuff that way too. So there are a lot more of we'll call it the legalese in the document. Those are really, that's what that last piece is. But let's go back to section 4.0, and here is where the difference is between option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is what you're seeing that we just went through. Option 2 inserts a new section in subsection A of 4.04. And that new section is the subsection B, and it's highlighted on the screen there. Notwithstanding the foregoing and regarding the severance pay in sub A, it's saying the city council shall not terminate the employee within 180 days of the seating of a new council member after an election, except for violations that are in 4.0 A and that B, I mean, that deal with illegally and stuff like that. And in the event that the city council does choose to terminate during this period, the employee will be granted 1.5 times the severance that's listed in sub A. There's a lot of political stuff going around. You're seeing cities where councils are changing drastically at the turn of an election. And this is just a piece that Gina has requested in order to maintain the stability of the professional manager that's not tied to politics, the non-political professional ability to perform the duties and responsibilities. And this is the provision that there has not been agreement between your negotiating committee, and as such, it's kind of turned to the council as a whole to resolve whether B, this little subsection B, is going to be included. It's included in option 2, and it's not included in option A. But it's one that Gina is requesting. And I think that's a review of what's there. If there are any questions of me.
So I want to clarify, is the provision that you're referring to in option 1 or option 2? I thought it's 2. Okay.
It's in option 2.
That's what I thought.
2.
Okay.
Yeah.
City Council President Barry.
Thank you for the presentation. So the main difference is that section 4.02. Is that correct? Between option 1 and option 2?
Yes, it's the
Between
highlighted
option 1 and
text.
option 2, it's 4.04 A sub B. That's the difference. That's the only difference between the two.
I do have another question. So you mentioned vacation time, and then you also mentioned that a city manager can work a lot of hours outside regular hours, and sometimes that would be more than the 40-hour week. So is there, and that they could take some time off to compensate for that. But is there a way to track those hours and then maybe get a dollar compensation rather than time? Because sometimes you have a new employee that wants to, be on top of things and show up to work all the time, and then they're doing those hours on top of it.
So that provision actually is more about an exempt position versus a non-exempt position. And when we have exempt positions, we don't necessarily track hour for hour what they're working in a week. And what that provision really entails is if Gina needs to leave early one day at like 3:30, she's not necessarily needing to use her accrued leave to take that time off, because we know she's going to make it up at a council meeting or on the weekend or something of that sort. So that's what that is really talking about. And we don't typically assign a dollar amount to it, because then we could get into some FLSA or Fair Labor Standards Act issues where we are no longer considering or treating that position as an exempt position.
Okay, that I knew that. I just wanted to hear it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. And thank you, Andrea. That's exactly one of the reasons for city managers. You don't want to be paying overtime or having them count their hours and track that to end up becoming something that is not exempt, because they're typically working 50 or more hours a week above, well above. Yeah.
Councilor Shevlin.
Thank you. In the section that's added in option 2, did Gina have some evidence from another city manager or some sort of documentation or example where she came up with this idea?
I don't think she had anything specific, but it is occurring. And I know it's occurring around the state where there are candidates that sometimes run on the platform, and sometimes the platform is kind of hidden or a rumor that they're running to get rid of the city manager or they come in running to replace the council, and the one thing that reminds them of the old council is the city manager. Um, True city managers are professional, non-political administrators, and that's what they're going to do. And it really gives, one of the reasons for the 180 days is to give them an opportunity to work together. I've had it happen to me over the course of my years where some candidates ran and their thought was, we're going to shake up City Hall. We're going to clean up what's going on. And within about 3 months, they started learning why council was making some of these decisions and what was going on, and that it wasn't the manager that was dictating. Because, I mean, people watch a council meeting, and I don't know if you've heard it, but I'm sure people have said it somewhere in Wilsonville that, yeah, when the city manager gives a proposal to the council all adopts it. And sometimes they see that, they don't understand all of the time and effort that's happened behind the scenes or in earlier meetings or committee meetings that have led to the final proposal, which the council has to adopt in public and has that opportunity to discuss those issues associated with it. But sometimes it does just seem really quick and easy, and that the manager's just running everything. And we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to work that through. And that's kind of what she's trying to do here.
Sure. Okay, so this is not uncommon
It's
to see this.
it's becoming more and more common. I'm an old school city manager, and I had just the regular severance. But as we're seeing more divisiveness in local government and federal and things like that, and the winds changing quickly, that it's just something to give pause for people to think before they get in and act real quick. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Anything else from staff?
No.
Okay. Council President Barry, can I have a motion to approve whatever option, or actually, I'll just take it back from you, I'm sorry. Any counselor want to make a motion to approve one of the options?
I move to approve option B.
Which is
There's no
option
B.
2.
Oh, two.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, I guess, any? Do you have any discussion? Go ahead, Councilor Skull.
Okay, so this has been a long process. It's not been easy, and we've gone through a lot of information here. But basically, when all was said and done, I sided on the side of option 2. Okay, and the reason being is because, I understand the political impacts, the decisiveness that's going on out there, and the point behind supporting this is to basically look at maintaining stability and continuity of the staff, of the position, and working with the council. I also believe in terms of balancing that out of protecting the employee or the city manager at the same time, and giving them some time to integrate with the council and to look at things that they need to do and adapt and to keep things moving forward within the city, but also with their integration with the council. The mayor and I have had quite a few discussions about this. I've been, given a lot of information about it and tried to weigh that out to make a fair decision. But with that said, I will, have chosen to stick with option 2 and then basically let the mayor make his recommendation and then leave it to the council to choose.
Any other discussion?
I have not been familiar with this type of clause, but the way it's been explained to me, and in light of just, as was mentioned, the political climate both locally and nationally and even internationally, can be challenging these days. And so it appears to me that this clause would protect the city manager from the whims and the whims of a council that, as we see, could be newly elected and then have an agenda that would include the ouster of the city manager within 180 days of an election, I guess, if I'm understanding, seating of a new city council member after an election. So it does make sense to me. I mean, if you have a good city manager, you would hope that their performance outside of the 180 days would shine, and you could see how how well that person performs. So I see it as a protection mechanism. So I'm not opposed to it.
Okay, well, I'll reserve my comments to the end. Counselor Cunningham, go ahead.
I figured I'd just jump in real quick and just throw in my 2 cents. I think there is a balance here to be struck. There is a legitimate argument to be made that, political whims maybe shouldn't be what somebody's livelihood and employment is held on. I've had some conversations with some folks about what, over the last more than a year in this role of what I've learned and how the local government really operates and things like that. And one of the things that, not that I'm comparing anyone to a dog here, but for lack of a better example, if you have a dog that is trained to bite and it bites somebody, do you get mad at the dog or do you get mad at the owner? And the council in this would be the owner, and the city manager would be the dog, for a lack of a better thing. No offense. Okay, Cocker Spaniel. But you don't get mad at the dog because the dog has been asked to do this thing, right? And the way that this works is that council sets policy. The city manager is asked to carry it out. So if you're unhappy with the way the things are working in the city, come talk to us. And we can go and have those conversations with the city manager. We can have it out here in council chambers about how we should be doing things. And we can direct policy to the city manager to carry out on behalf of us and the city. So now, on the flip side of that, the balance here. If there were to be somebody who were to run and say, when I get into City Hall, I'm going to shake it up. We're going to have a new city manager because I don't believe that this one can do X, Y, and Z. And the voters decide, yes, we want this person to come in and we want this shakeup to occur, regardless of the last, little parable I gave, I guess. Then there is a balance there to be struck, and there's an argument to be made that if the voters will these people into office, and that's what they're looking to have done, that maybe we do honor that and accept that and don't put a roadblock in place of what our citizens go to the ballot box and ask for. So I'll kind of throw that out there. I'm about 50-50 on this, so.
Am I up?
You're up.
Are you going to let me, or are you going to?
I just want to respond to that. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, for the sake of discussion here, I kind of agree with Councilor Cunningham, but I think to his second side of this is the will of the voters, and if they do want to make changes, I also think that there should be adequate time for those changes to be made. I mean, basically coming in and within 30 to 60 days, just shaking everything up, whether it be city council or staff or even in a large company, that causes a lot of chaos. And that chaos can, basically impair decisions. It becomes emotional, and it slows things down, and it just causes a lot of chaos within the organization. So I think, and I'm not really sure, and I've been wrestling with this with myself, whether 6 months is good or, I don't know what that time frame would be, but I believe that there should be some time there to allow for transition if need be, or allowed for some negotiation and some work amongst the council staff and the city manager to integrate and see if they can work things out as things change.
Okay. So, couple of things. Are you wanting to say something?
Go ahead, you've been waiting.
That's all right.
Really?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I have experience where I worked for a city, and I was hired on, and it was right after an election, and so in that interim period of my hire, invite to start work, and the first day when I showed up, the new leadership fired department heads, and so the person who hired me is gone. And it's not just the city manager, but it's a trickle-down effect to different department and staff that I think we have to be cognizant, because the city manager is in charge of hiring department heads, right, and staff. So I just think it's really important to have that period of time of 180 days to let somebody come in and learn the job. And, there might be times where the city council needs to say, hey, let's think about doing something this way, and, work with them. So it's problem solving and teamwork instead of just a big chaotic shakeup. That's my 2 cents.
Good 2 cents. Okay, so here's my thought. I disagree with Mr. Meyer's presentation that there were 2 options to consider. And I've had, and Councilor Skoll and I, in all fairness, and I hope he will articulate, we might have had extensive conversations, but they were today and at the last minute, and presented this in writing for me. I didn't get to see it visually until 2 p.m. Because I had been in meetings. And I was talking orally with Mr. Myers in the morning, not in a position to look at anything, and have been nonstop going from where I was in the morning to a mayor's conference. So I disagree that Councilor Skoll and I had an opportunity to talk as well as we could have. Secondly, I don't agree that there are 2 options, in the sense there's an option that we're working on, and how I look at things that in negotiation, because unless Councilor Skoll disagree, I spent a lot of time on this, is that there are certain provisions you negotiate. So originally, there's a subparagraph about the city manager having to give council notice. For the longest time, it was 30 days. I presented a counterproposal of 90, and we ended up on 60. So if there's a suggestion that there's an interest in protecting the city as an institution, why would someone start off with a 30-day termination clause? That's just a comment. The other thing is the amount of time and effort that went into this. There's inherently conflicts. There's conflicts because some of the involved parties, have their own contracts. And it's problematic because everybody is looking at language that they have on their contract. People know each other. And I'm not gonna give any names or anything, but in retrospect, it would have been something that an outside attorney should have handled and represented counsel on the interest, because I think everybody tried their best, but there are these just natural conflicts. And what I mean by a conflict, to speak of the kind of the extremism out there, no matter what side of the aisle, I'm not talking about intentional, mean conflicts at all. I'm just saying an appearance of a conflict, and I think there were some problems there. With that said, putting this all together, because I'm pretty exhausted in my involvement on this, is that sub B has an inherent problem. And it's a problem that was, this paragraph in some form of it was presented in an early draft. And I was trying to find a way to fix it. But it's not workable. And I don't mind losing the vote because I think when a council is elected, we are the people, people's representative. And if a council decides to shoot themselves in the foot and fire the city manager, that's on them, and they'll answer to it. And we have effectively not had that provision in past contracts. Secondly, here's the inherent problem. This is saying that anytime there's a change on council, there's a built-in 180 days. So let's talk about this hypothetically. We're all working together. I'm thrown out of office. The new mayor comes in. You guys have known and worked with the existing city manager, and there's only one vote change. Okay? That means if there was an issue with the city manager, and I'm talking objectively, it's not about Gina, it's not about anybody, it's about how this contract applies to anybody that's a city manager. But if there is one person that changes, that means the council as a whole, even though a majority of them are more experienced, is stuck 180 days to make a decision. And I don't think that's something we need to do. And I think there are times where a body of council has been put in office for a reason, that there was a bad city manager. I've seen that in certain circumstances, and not here. So I'm not, but I think it strips, the council of the power to act based on what the people want. And I should note that there's a severance already of 6 months. So I think that that to me is sufficient to protect the city manager. So I think most council would say, gee, you know, why would we pay 6 months for someone that, you know, I just think that's enough. I don't believe in this type of provision. And I haven't seen it in contracts that I've been involved in professionally, and I'm bringing my experience in before. So this will be unique. The contract that was provided to us was a contract generated by an organization that's quite frankly, presented a form contract we started with, and we spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get it back down to a contract that was workable, in my view, and represented more of what the council may have, as opposed to a contract we initially got that seemed was more focused on the city manager. So it was not a balanced contract. And Councilor Skoll may disagree with that, but those are my views. So you know, my view is there's really an option that we're working towards, one provision that was holding us back, but from my perspective is the one vote on council. The other portions of the agreement we agreed to was tied into everything else. So if you're saying there are two options, that's a representation of Mr. Myers, not myself, and my position on that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Councilor Shevlin.
Thank you. Mayor, you make a very compelling argument. That's probably why you're so good at law. But so I want to pose a hypothetical situation. We've talked about the whims of a new council member coming in, and heads, you know, that person wants heads to roll. And of course, that ultimately will depend on the full vote of the council about any head that might be rolling in the way of a city manager. But let me look at it on the flip side. So if we have a city manager who hasn't been able to get on board with what we as a council want to do, and we've tried all the normal ways of trying to improve performance, and then it happens to be during an election period, and then we have a new councilor or mayor that is elected, and we still haven't been able to get the city manager to move in the direction that we want, and we can't get them to perform better, then we have another 6 months before we could take any action. Am I understanding correctly?
That is correct.
Okay.
Based on this provision, any change on council, and if you interpret this, I just want to make sure I'm correct before I misstate. That means that if we had a vacancy and there was an appointment, that triggers that 180. And I have a fundamental problem. So it's not only an election cycle, but it's an appointment of a new council member. And,
But it says after an election.
oh, sorry, that's.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad you caught that.
Yeah, thank you for catching that. I stand corrected on that. But I have a problem with that anyway, so in all fairness, so.
Well, it made me, after your comments, Mayor, I started thinking about it from the reverse of trying to protect the city manager position so much as trying to move, if the council's trying to move in a direction that the city manager won't take. I noticed Mr. Myers, or he did have his hand up, maybe he took it down.
Councilor Cunningham.
I guess there's an argument to be made here, too, that it's a little bit of a political Uno reverse, because you get somebody who runs for council, they get on, they go, hey, let's get rid of this city manager, but now the reason that you wouldn't pursue this in those 6 months is because what this is a penalty to the taxpayer. It's an extra 50% given to the city manager for being fired in that first 6 months. Well, that money doesn't come from nowhere, it comes from our taxpayers. And that would be where I say a political Uno reverse is that now it's a hit back on those counselors who are making that decision to make them look bad in a political realm, to say, look what they're doing to our tax money and how they're wasting our tax money here. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, and again, that's kind of why I'm waffling on it, but I definitely see the mayor's point on this, but I don't like how this also kind of holds our taxpayer money as the threat.
Can I ask for clarification?
Sure. Is that why your hand's up, is for clarification?
It
Okay,
is,
go ahead.
And I used the light.
Yes, you did.
So I just want to clarify that it's within 180 days of seating a new city council member after the election, except for violations as defined. So can we just describe those violations one more time?
Scroll down a little bit here. So that is this section right here. Richard, I don't know if you want to go over that.
Yeah, the violations are a thorough investigation and reasonable cause to believe the city manager has engaged in criminal conduct or has other off-duty behavior that the city council determines is significantly impairs the employee's ability to effectively do their job, committed fraud, misappropriated city funds, goods, or services for the city manager's own benefit, violated the Oregon ethics laws, or fail to or refuses to comply with written policies of the city, and other acts of misconduct that can cause injury to the city, but not limited to willful, corrupt, reckless misuse of the official authority. Yeah.
Could you roll it back up so we capture all the other provisions? Councilor Cunningham, did you have?
Yeah, so the first thing that I notice is we go back into that section and read it, it says after a thorough review. So then the question becomes how long does it take to, or not a review, an investigation. So how long does it take to conduct a thorough investigation? We're sitting here talking about a 6-month period. If a thorough investigation takes 2-3 months, we're already halfway there at that point in time anyways. I'm starting to have even more trouble jiving this one.
Thank you. Did I interrupt? I'm sorry. Could you scroll up a bit to so here's the deterrent that I would like to respond to Councilor Cunningham's thing, the taxpayer. The deterrent of that new counselor is to know that, and everybody on council, if they vote to terminate without cause, they're paying 6 months. To me, that's enough of a penalty, a repercussion to the taxpayer. This one is asking for a severance of 6 months and half of that, so 9 months. Up to, year and a half. That's even something really concerning to me, and I read that wrong. And let me explain. I've only seen this till this afternoon. It was conveyed to me on a conversation, so I'm more of a hard no on that provision than I was before we entered this meeting. So my view is we as a council, I firmly, in my one vote on council, believe that council has certain obligations and we speak for the people of our community, and we should not be so restricted in any sort of contractual relationship with staff that, or at least to not be able to act promptly when called upon. I think our risk as an elected body is to take the political hit if we make a bad decision. So in my view, it's a bad decision for this member of council to vote for that provision. I think the community, given we're trying to facilitate trust, would say that is very one-sided. So that's kind of where I'm at. Councilor Shevlin.
Just for consideration, Just for consideration, does it soften it or change it or make it more palatable if it were less than that 180-day period of time? Or is it just the whole concept that we would allow this sort of provision for any length of time after an election and a new council member is seated? Is there any advantage to the process that's being proposed to put a shorter time period on it?
So, if you guys are okay, if I can respond.
Yes.
before I
Go
can.
ahead. Go ahead.
So I will want to tell you is I spent a lot of time on track changes. This provision was brought up. I was really trying to think of all scenarios, like maybe if we had 2 counselors or shift and all these things. But it really comes down to what do you think the role of city council is? And that's, at least from my perspective, what is our role? Our role is to try to make good decisions, but that's our job as the employer representative for the direct reports we have. And so if we make a wrong decision politically, and we fire the city manager and it's a huge chaos, everybody bails out,
Yeah, it's on our shoulders.
It's on our shoulders. To me, that deterrent is here with or without that provision. And I would also, what's disconcerting for me is that I almost feel like it puts it in a challenging situation with the relationships, between the administration and council. And frankly, I do acknowledge there's one city in particular that's had a huge turnover. And I've seen both sides of that where there's concerns about the city manager. There's going to be different perspectives, but that's the issue. There are different perspectives. And ultimately, I'm not going to compare our city with that city. First of all, I think our city is managed historically very well. And so we're fighting over, or at least we're having a discussion over a provision based on what's going on outside our community, and I don't see it's needed. In fact, I think it could build in distrust of our community hearing this conversation about this provision, because I think, in all fairness, it doesn't matter what political whim happens on council. I think ultimately we've had a history of good city managers, and we're trying to officially hire one now. So
Thank you.
Counselor Cunningham. Oh, excuse me, Counselor Skoll. I'm sorry, I'm tired today.
That's okay. Just a quick question regarding the 1.5 severance. If there was a termination pending within that 6 months and it goes past, and it's out, once it gets past the 6 months, does that 1.5 revert back to 6 months?
Yes, so it's after, if it's after that 180 days, and
So-
it meets the termination definition in the previous section, then yes, it would just be the initial severance.
So then a council could sit and say, okay, thinking this is what we might want to do, but they could sit for 6 months and try to work through things, and then after that 180 days, that it just goes right back to section 402A.
Correct.
Do you mind, whoever's are you controlling? Sorry. Could you go up to the termination section? And Counselor Shevlin? Is it, oh, no. Oh,
I think it was Council President Barry.
are you up?
I don't know.
Well, I have it.
All I know is I did the green light.
Okay, well, you did, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to, go ahead.
I don't care about timing. I mean,
Go ahead.
do you want me?
No, that's all right.
So when I think about this, I think about community stability and thrive. And to me, that means like less turnover in employees and trying to work with people on problem solving. And we read the termination that they still can be fired or terminated for good cause. But I just really believe in the value of trying to work with people and problem solve. And I also, think about, I've seen different people on this council and other councils where when you're not on the council, you have a perspective, and that perspective can be very different than when you're actually sitting up here trying to make decisions, because now when you're on the council, you have different information that can problem solve and whatnot. So I like this clause.
Okay.
Anyway, it's my
Thank you.
two thoughts.
Thank you. Could you scroll down? Just in that same section, it's another provision. So because this is where I think there's some characterization differences of opinion with Mr. Myers, because frankly, Mr. Myers and I have only talked maybe twice during this conversation of this negotiating with Ms. Trohal. But look at subsection D, and if the employee resigns following an offer to accept resignation, whether formal or informal, by the city as a representative of the majority of the city council, that the employee resign, then the employee may declare a termination as of the date of that suggestion. So here's the issue that I was wrestling with that, and I never got a defined answer, although I see a scenario where, to Councilor Cunningham's point, the provision dealing with, something that would deprive someone of a severance. So, for example, there have been circumstances, and it usually happens all the time, where a city public employee has been found to have violated something. And in lieu of making a big issue, you have a meeting with them and say, would you like your resignation? Well, this triggers the 6 months. And I don't agree with that. And I've explained to staff, CIS attorney that's involved. And I guess I got to turn to the city attorney, because here's a problem, because I'm talking about how we negotiated this, and to me it's relevant. So how do I do this? Because I want to do that. I've also tried to be generic on certain things, not to violate due process rights, but I guess my problem is there's specific reasoning behind some of this stuff, and that I feel is in conflict. And so how do I do that without triggering a problem and waiving privilege?
The council as a whole can decide to waive attorney-client privilege and reveal attorney-client communications.
Okay. So we have to do a formal motion to waive?
I'm a little confused.
The
Are
mayor
you
is talking
talking
about
a specific?
conversations that happened amongst in-house and outside legal counsel on this. And so for that to be shared in a public meeting, because the client is the city, council as a whole has to decide whether or not to waive the privilege, that privileged communication.
All right, I think I can do this, and we can still have that motion if you want. If we need to, I can go above it, and if you can cut me off, can you do that if you think I'm going? So hypothetically, there are conflicts between insurance companies which cover certain things. And they have their interests. And I can at least identify that the attorney that we were dealing with represents our insurance company, right? So, and there is issues that aren't covered by insurance, i.e. breach of contract, that every dollar in any breach of contract that we were found liable as a city comes directly out of the coffers. Now, there may be some indirect CIS increase in premiums and things like that, depending on the conflict, but there's competing interest here. And that was clearly the case on some of these provisions. So this one specifically is problematic to me because 99% of the time when an egregious conduct happens with in my professional experience, defending the state of Oregon from employment suits, so I've been on both sides, and then I've represented public employees. But most of the time, there's a resignation and ask for a voluntary resignation. That provision was one that I have had a problem with. Now, Councilor Skull and I never had an opportunity to have that conversation because he didn't know there was an issue really until today, and I'm running around. But there's more conversations and that went on, and I can give you enough to say that I think that provision is problematic because that means if we have a person is willfully violating the law, but we choose to give them grace to leave, then we have to pay that 6 months. So that's the problem with that provision. So then you tie it into the one that we're talking about. That provision, to me, there is so many safeguards for the city manager in the agreement, much more so than our current city manager's agreement was, that I just see that as really overreach. So that's my view.
Can I recommend, Richard, can you talk about that specific item D there that's up on the screen, and in your experience, how that works as far as resignation in lieu of termination?
Yeah, and typically there's, and I was looking to see, because often there's an opportunity for further negotiation there with the employee regarding that. And that may be something you want to include in there that.
Mr. Myers, just so you know, sorry to interrupt your thought, I'm not suggesting we talk about that provision. I am trying to give you an example that we already have a built-in agreement that is pretty protective of the city manager as it is. And so I don't see a reason to have that additional protection. So, but yes, to me, that is still a problem. So that. Counselor Skoll.
Just a point of clarification here. Just want to make sure everybody knows that I'm in agreement with the mayor about the fact that this just happened today. We just got this information this morning. I found out about it at probably about 9:30 this morning. We have had several conversations, but it's been fairly condensed and, kind of learned on the go. So, but I still have, my position is still with option 2. Regarding that, we've talked about trust. And in my statement, I talked about the balance of this whole process in terms of balancing the continuity of the operations of the city and the staff and with the employee. But within that balance, there is a level of risk. And, that's part of it. It's a matter of having that employee, allowing that employee time to, or allowing the city manager time to integrate with a new council. It's not going to happen in 30 to 60 days. It may, but, to give it proper amount of time, it could be 6 months. And essentially the new council needs to acclimatize there too. So in terms of my statement about balance, it's about balancing what's already in existence versus the risk of change, and how that happens and maintained in the continuity of operation and continuity of decision-making through the whole process. And so that would be my read and my response to that comment about trust.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? City Council President Barry.
So another question for clarification. We're making a decision on these options based on a contract between the city and a new city manager named Gina, right?
Correct.
And so we're not talking about general contracts that could be used anytime with any city manager, because if it wasn't Gina, then we would still be going through the same process with coming up with a contract and tailoring it to that person, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Cunningham.
Mayor, you've spoken about the role of council, and to me, that role is that we're responsible to the people who elected us. We're responsible to our citizens. We're responsible to our taxpayers. Going back to my point of, if the voters so will it, then it should be. And also that it feels like this is a penalty that we'd be self-hamstringing ourselves and taking those taxpayer dollars and using them as a penalty for imposing the will of the voters. And, going through this discussion, thank you all very much. It was a good discussion, lots of good information, lots of good back and forth. I'll just say that I've tilted to the side of option 1 at this point in time, that I think that having that clause in there, I don't think it's necessary. I think that, like I said, it doesn't. If our role and responsibility is to take care of our citizens who elected us and we are here to represent, then our first duty and our first priority is to them. And I think that we have to protect their ability to use their voices and their abilities to have their taxpayer money protected. So I'll be voting no against option 2.
And so just if I can have a thought, this isn't about Gina Troha. And I'm a little, if staff or anybody in this room is thinking it's about Gina, it's not. It's objectively, and I disagree with the concept that when we look at boilerplate, and this is boilerplate, it's setting if you will, a policy that of a provision that once we put it in, it has nothing to do with Gina. It has to do with the next city manager. or someone else. Hopefully Gina will, like Brian is leaving, but, we'll clone Gina and she'll be here for a long, long time. But to me, from how I look at things objectively, it's what does it mean? What's the precedent? And that's how I look at things. So when Council Berry says this is about Gina, yes, it's her contract. But the terms of the contract are setting a policy of how we contractually hire the direct reports to the council, and that's the problem. And there aren't any, or not, how many, Mr. Myers, cities have this in the state of Oregon, have this provision? And I can tell you.
I don't know that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I can tell you that the ones I've seen, and I've seen several, don't. And I can say that I know that the city attorney has looked over the Beaverton agreement. I don't think that provision's in there, but I'll defer to Amanda. Do you know if that provision is in the Beaverton?
I do not know off the top of my head if
Okay,
it is.
well, I know it's not in Tigard and others. So I've gone out and literally throughout this process, looked at other agreements and also agreements I deal with. It's not something that is, it's almost like a test case in my personal opinion. And I don't think it's necessary in our city because we already have a great staff and a great city manager who's retiring and another one coming forward. And I disagree with that, so. Any other conversation? Okay. There's a motion to approve option 2. That's the only pending motion right now that's been seconded. So notwithstanding our opinions, that's the one we're voting on. So with no further discussions, all those in favor of option 2, say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed?
No?
No.
No. So it appears that option 2 fails 3-2. Okay. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of option 1.
I move for council to approve option 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Opposed.
Okay, the motion passes 3-2. Okay. Is there any other business? Okay, anything of staff?
Do we have to have a motion to approve this entire thing?
Option 1 is the one that was approved, and that'll be the one that's sent back to Ms. Trollhoff for her.
Consideration.
Consider it.
Yep.
Richard, do you have any other comments?
No, I just want to say thank you for the discussion and everything, and we will take the agreement to Gina for her consideration and possible approval.
And then you'll continue to report back to Counselor Skull and I if there's any other conversations. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The council meeting is adjourned at 5:23.
Thank you.